As she's singing at the first time, the computer decided it needed to take a breather and help her start over again. So, and did a great job. Thank you, Kim. And that idea that Emmanuel means God with us. Understand that all throughout the year. It's not just a Christmas thing. That's not just his name at Christmas time. That's all the time. It's God with us. And Kim, I love the fact that you're bringing in the Christmas music even now. That's awesome to see. Today I'm not going to preach a Christmas message, but I do want to preach about three kings, if that gets us in the spirit there. Although three kings, that's not the biblical. It's not only three kings. It was a magi. So it's not three kings in the Bible either. So that's as close as I'm going to get to Christmas today. So just Merry Christmas. So if you would turn to 2 Kings chapter 3 with me. Today I do want to be an encouragement to everybody. I would like to open up God's Word and remind us all of where we need to be and what we need to be doing. If you're a child of God, you're in a foreign situation, and I'm in a foreign situation. And sometimes we wonder what we should be doing while we're here waiting for Christ to return. Because Jesus Christ is coming back. He is going to return. But what are we supposed to be doing in the meantime? The day that you got saved, your citizenship changed from one who was outside of Christ and on your way to hell to somebody who is now a member of the family of God. Your citizenship itself changed. And a lot of times we don't think about that, but it is a biblical principle. Our citizen, this is not our home. You've heard the song that this world is not my home, I'm just passing through. That is what we are doing. We're just passing through because our citizenship is somewhere else. Look at Ephesians chapter 2 and verse 19. It says, "Now therefore you are no longer strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the saints and members of the household of God." Your citizenship changed. The day that you got saved, you went from a family of people who were destined for hell, and you got brought and put into the family of God. Everything about you changed. Your citizenship changed, and you're no longer a foreigner when it comes to citizenship in heaven. But while we're on this earth, we are still in a foreign situation. People who are still without Jesus Christ need to see us behaving as citizens of God's family, because that's what we are. We are citizens of God's family. But what is that supposed to look like? What are you supposed to be doing between now, the time that you got saved, and the time that Jesus Christ returns? What are we supposed to be doing? And remember, you don't have to always be searching for God's will in your life, because Jesus Christ is God's will for your life. That, if you want to know what God's will is, it is Jesus Christ. And I've talked about it in previous sermons, whether you pick chocolate or vanilla, God doesn't care. Just choose one and do it all for the glory of God. Whether you work in this place or that place, go to this college, that college, just do it all for the glory of God, because God's will for your life is Jesus Christ. So you don't have to search for what God's will is for your life. Live your life for Him in a way that glorifies Him. But let's take that thought a little bit deeper. What are we supposed to be doing between the time that we get saved and the time that Christ returns? What are we supposed to be doing with our lives? We don't have to search for God's will, because Jesus Christ is God's will. Do what you do, all for the glory of God. In 2 Kings, we have the story which contains such a powerful application that if we miss it, we end up lacking in so many areas. So I want to look at this story in 2 Kings chapter 3. We'll start in verse 1 here. It says, "Now Jehoram the son of Ahab became king over Israel at Samaria in the 18th year of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, and reigned 12 years. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord, but not like his father and mother, for he put away the sacred pillar of Baal that his father had made. Nevertheless, he persisted in the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, who had made Israel sin. He did not depart from them." Jehoram is the son of one of the worst kings that Israel ever had. King Ahab, we know the story of King Ahab and Queen Jezebel. He is a wicked king. This is his son, King Jehoram. He's not quite as bad as his father was, but he is still a king who lives in defiance against God. He defies God. He's still a king that if you list all the kings, he goes into the category of one of the evil kings in Israel. They had more evil kings than they had righteous kings in Israel. He falls into this category of evil kings. his father Ahab had made a deal with the Moabites during his reign, and the Moabites have been faithful to follow that deal, but everything's about to change. Look at verse 4 with me. Now Mesha, king of Moab, was a sheep breeder, and he regularly paid the king of Israel 100,000 lambs and the wool of 100,000 rams. But it happened when Ahab died that the king of Moab rebelled against the king of Israel. Now that daddy's gone, now that King Ahab has died, the Moabites decide they no longer need to pay tribute to Israel. That was an arrangement we made with Ahab. Now Jehoram's the king, and we don't have to do that. We're calling it off. We're not paying you anything else. And this causes trouble for King Jehoram, and he starts to put a plan together. Wait a second. Just because Ahab died, that doesn't change the arrangement we had. You're supposed to still pay these things to Israel, and just because Ahab's off the scene doesn't change the agreement. So look at what he does. He gets this plan together in verse 6. Look at chapter 3 and verse 6 with me. It says, So King Jehoram went out of Samaria at that time and mustered all Israel. Then he went and sent to Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, saying, The king of Moab has rebelled against me. Will you go with me to fight against Moab? And he said, I will go up. I am as you are, my people as your people, my horses as your horses. Then he said, Which way shall we go up? And he answered, By way of the wilderness of Edom. Jehoram has just numbered his army, and he's recruited help from Jehoshaphat, king of Judah. He says, I need help. Moab has rebelled against me, and I need your help. Will you help me? And Israel and Judah are all Israelites. It's just a divided kingdom at this point. And Jehoshaphat says, hey, my people are your people. The things that I have are yours. We are God's people together. And yes, I will help you. I will bring the kingdom of Judah in with the kingdom of Israel, and we will fight together against the king of Moab. But there was still one more piece that needed to be put into place here. When Jehoram asked Jehoshaphat which way they should go up to Moab, he suggests that they go up by the way of the wilderness of Edom. Let's go that direction. This is where they pick up the third member of their team. They need one more piece here. Look at verse 9. So the king of Israel went with the king of Judah and the king of Edom, and they marched on that roundabout route 7 days, and there was no water for the army, nor for the animals that followed them. They pick up the king of Edom on their way. The king of Israel goes to the king of Judah, says, hey, I need help. And he says, I'll definitely help you. I will bring my army into the situation with you. And then the king of Israel says, which way should we go? Well, let's go by the way of Edom. Let's pick up one more piece to the puzzle. Let's go ahead and get the king of Edom on the way. So now they're on their way. They're 7 days into their journey, and they realize they have a problem. When they get a week into their trip, they realize that they have a problem that they can't fix. They're out of water. They are now a week down the road. They have no water, and without water, they're going to die. Even if they turn back now, it's going to be a week before they can get back home. If you're already 7 days into the journey and realize you're without water, 7 more days isn't what you need. So they're in a situation where they're in a lot of trouble. And I want to point out again that the king of Israel was not a king who had a relationship with God. Remember, he's the king that did evil in the sight of the Lord. He doesn't have a relationship with God. He defies God. He's a wicked king, and he's actually the one king in this team that panics the easiest. Look at what happens in verse 10. And the king of Israel said, alas, for the Lord has called these 3 kings together to deliver them into the hand of Moab. This word alas, if you were to take that word alas and put it in 2019, it means what? That's what alas means. Look what God did. Like what? He brought us all out here to die. That's what the Lord of Israel, the Lord of Judah, God has brought us out here to die. This guy's not running to God during his dilemma. He's blaming God. God brought us all out here. God brought us here to die. We are a week into our trip. We have no water, and there's no way we can go back now and live. He brought us out here to die. He's blaming God for what his situation is. He's not turning to God in any way. And it's amazing that people haven't changed much throughout the years. And now that we are in 2019, a lot of times we stand there going, what? God's forsaken me. Look at my bad situation. And we blame God for everything that's going on. But there's a better way to handle it, and King Jehoshaphat points out what that better way is to handle this problem. Hey, it's not time to panic. It's not time to blame God for our problems. It's time to do what's right. So look at verse 11. It says, but Jehoshaphat said, is there no prophet of the Lord here, that we may inquire of the Lord by him? So one of the servants of the king of Israel answered and said, Elisha the son of Shaphat is here, who poured water on the hands of Elijah. And Jehoshaphat said, the word of the Lord is with him. So the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat and the king of Edom went down to him. So Jehoshaphat suggests that maybe they should run to the Lord rather than away from the Lord. That's his plan. King of Israel goes into panic mode and starts blaming God. The king of Judah, King Jehoshaphat, says, hold on, there's a better way to handle this. Maybe instead of blaming God, maybe instead of cursing God and running away from God, maybe we should run to him. They have found themselves in a problem that they cannot fix. They have no water. There's no water source near them. But maybe instead of blaming God, they should ask him for some help. And that's what Jehoshaphat's suggesting here. And they find out that the prophet Elisha is close by, and they go to him. But when they get to Elisha, they don't receive the warmest of welcomes when they show up to Elisha. They go to the prophet of God and say, hey, we've got a problem here, and we need you to call on God and help us out. But when they get there, it's not a warm welcome that they get. Look at verse 13 with me. Then Elisha said to the king of Israel, what have I to do with you? Go to the prophets of your father and the prophets of your mother. But the king of Israel said to him, no, for the Lord has called these three kings together to deliver them into the hand of Moab. When Elisha sees Jehoram, the king of Israel, he basically says, how does your problem concern me? Isn't that, it gives you that warm, fuzzy feeling, doesn't it? Like, wow, he received him really well. Like, how's this my problem? Yeah, you're out here, you're without water, you're going to die, but how's that my problem? And realize he's speaking to the king of Israel here, the one who did evil in the sight of the Lord. He says, how's this my problem? Why don't you call on the false prophets that your parents called on? Why don't you just call on the prophets of Baal like Ahab and Jezebel did? Why don't you go to them? Now you're interested in God. Now you have time for the real God. But you haven't had a moment for him before this. So how's your problem concern me? Why don't you just go back and call on the prophets that your parents called on? Go ask them for help. That's who you've been relying on this whole time anyway. Why all of a sudden do you have a moment for God? Why all of a sudden do you have time for God? And it's amazing how little time people give God until their world starts falling apart. And then it's amazing how fast we run to God. I just want to let you know I've been out of church for a while. I haven't been talking with you for a while. I haven't been doing what's right, but this is a crisis and I need you now. This is usually how people operate. But then Elisha turns and he sees King Jehoshaphat. And the tune changes. Everything changes. He says, okay, he's here too. Look at what happens in verse 14. And Elisha said, as the Lord of hosts lives, before whom I stand, surely, were it not that I regard the presence of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, that I would not look at you nor see you. But now bring me a musician. Then it happened when the musician played that the hand of the Lord came upon him. Now those are some pretty harsh words. If it wasn't for the fact that Jehoshaphat was here, I wouldn't have any time for you at all. You wouldn't have a moment of my attention, and I would walk the other way. But since he's here, yeah, I'm going to help you out. The king of Israel didn't have a relationship with God, nor was he interested in a relationship with God. He just wanted God to show up for him in his time of need. And you can see the heart of these two kings here. King of Israel, yeah, I'm not interested in God until now. Now, yes, absolutely. God, you're the great one. I need your help. But the king of Judah, is the one that says, "Yeah, we should have been calling on him the whole time. We should have been there all along." So God decides to help out through a bit of an object lesson, and this object lesson still applies to every one of us today. Look at verse 16. It says, "And he said, Thus says the Lord, make this valley full of ditches. For thus says the Lord, you shall not see wind, nor shall you see rain. Yet the valley shall be filled with water, so that you, your cattle, and your animals may drink. And this is a simple matter in the sight of the Lord. He will also deliver the Moabites into your hand." The king of Israel is begging for Elisha's help here. And this is the answer that he gets. Go dig ditches. He doesn't give a whole lot of detail here. There's no other details given. Go out there and start digging ditches. How's that going to help? Just go dig ditches. That's the only answer they get. There's no explanation. There's no sensible solution. Just dig ditches. Well, what's going to happen if we do it? Just go dig ditches. How's that going to help? Just go dig ditches. That's all they get. And I'm sure these three kings, while they're digging these ditches, are probably having some really interesting conversations. This doesn't make any sense at all. Go out and dig ditches all over the valley. Just go do it. Jehoshaphat's the only one out of the three with any kind of relationship with God. Elisha just told them that it wasn't going to rain, and yet the valley was going to be filled with water. But to ensure that this happens, start digging ditches. There's no water source around here to be seen anywhere. And now you're telling me it's not even going to rain? Where are we going to get the water? Dig ditches. But I'm thirsty. Then you better start digging ditches. Can I get a drink before I dig the ditch? Just dig the ditches. That's the only instruction they get. Dig ditches. Now they're digging ditches, and the only reasonable answer for water is out of the question. It's not even going to rain. You're not even going to see rain. All they know to do is to dig. So that's what they did, and by nightfall there's still no water. There's still no water. But by the morning everything's going to change. Everything's going to change. Look at verse 20. Now it happened in the morning when the grain offering was filled or offered, that suddenly water came by way of Edom, and the land was filled with water. Water may have just flowed down from Edom. Remember, they're going up to Edom, or they're going up to Moab. Water may have just flowed down, but more than likely they unknowingly tapped into an underground water source while they were digging ditches, because it does say that the water came down from Edom. It could have been an underground stream or whatever. Who knows what this was? But it doesn't say that God just put the water there. You know, it came from Edom. The water was there, came from Edom. So while they were digging these ditches, maybe they got close enough that the pressure broke through the ground. I don't know how the water came there, but it did come by way of Edom. This water begins to fill the ditches up, and it starts creating an illusion that God has designed the whole time. Remember, God didn't only say that they were going to have water. He also told them that he's going to deliver Moab into their hands. So what do? Dig ditches. That's all they have to do. Just go dig. Remember, Elisha said that God was going to bring the results. God's going to take care of the water problem. God's going to take care of the army. God's going to take care of all your problems, but you have to go dig the ditches. Go dig. Look at verse 21. And when all the Moabites heard that the kings had come up to fight against them, all who were able to bear arms and older were gathered, and they stood at the border. Then they arose up early in the morning, and the sun was shining on the water, and the Moabites saw the water on the other side as red as blood. And they said, "This is blood. The kings have surely struck swords and have killed one another. Now therefore, Moab to the spoil." The Moabites have gathered everybody together who's old enough to carry a weapon, and they're ready to go to war. But when they show up, they see a display like nothing they've ever seen before. They look down into the valley, and God, this isn't usually the weapon we normally would choose, God creates a sunrise, a beautiful sunrise, and he has filled the ditches up with water. So when the Moabites look at the sun shining on that water from up high, they look down and it looks like the whole valley is filled with blood. And their only conclusion is those guys showed up, those three kingdoms came together to come against us, and they apparently upset each other, and they've killed each other, and look what they've done. They have turned the whole valley into a bloodbath. They've killed each other. So they decided to immediately go collect the spoil. Well, we don't have to fight them. They clearly killed each other. So let's go collect the spoil. Let's go to Israel and collect the spoil. And when they get to Israel, they run into surprise number 2. Look at verse 24. So when they came to the camp of Israel, Israel rose up and attacked the Moabites. So they fled before them, and they entered their land, killing the Moabites. This is exactly what God promised. He promised water and victory with one condition. You dig ditches. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The military plan, the victory doesn't make a lot of sense. God, what do we do? What do you want them to do to get this water, and you're going to spare them from the Moabites? What are you going to do? Tell them to dig ditches. Okay? Just tell them to dig ditches. That's it. Go dig. Go dig. These kings had a problem that they were not capable of fixing. They're 7 days in. They're going to die out there without water. They had no way of producing what they needed, so they ran to God for help. And God had no problem assisting them with their dilemma, but he did require something from them first. I require something from you. God did what they were not capable of doing. But they had to do what they were capable of doing. They had to dig the ditches. Can God take care of the problems that we can't take care of? Yes, he can. He absolutely can. And he will. He'll take care of what you're not capable of doing. But it's not our job to sit there and say, it's all right, God's got this. I don't even have to do what I'm capable of doing. God's just going to do it all. That's the wrong answer. God will do what you're not able to do. Sometimes he even does what you're able to do. He's a good God. But sometimes he tells us, hey, do what you're capable of doing. Dig the ditches. When we look at this story, it's a no-brainer that God's the hero of the story. God's clearly the hero here. But there's one other hero in this story, and it's not Elisha. Out of the 3 kings, Jehoshaphat's the only one with the faith to seek God. He's the king that is the other hero in the story. He was the one who understood what it is going to take to win. Do we have water? No. Do we have any way to get water? No. Are we going to be able to defeat the Moabites if we're dehydrated? No. Then what do? We're going to go to God. He's the only one with the faith to know what it takes to win. Digging ditches is hard work. I don't know if you've ever dug ditches, or have you ever, planting a garden that's a lot of work. Just plant a garden. Those aren't big ditches, but it's a lot of work. Digging ditches is a lot of work. And the payment for this specific task that they're asked to do here was the promise that the impossible would happen. What are we going to get out of it? The impossible will be made possible. How? Dig ditches. When? Dig ditches. But dig ditches. Just dig. That's all you have to do. No answers are needed. Just dig the ditches. There's no water source anywhere to be seen. And water is just supposed to miraculously appear. It's just going to come and fill these ditches up. And somehow, these ditches were going to have a part in winning the war. And when you're out there digging, you're not thinking, oh, this is definitely going to help us win. And yes, it's going to fill up with water, even though Elisha told us it's not going to rain and there's no water source anywhere to be seen. Yeah, it's just going to fill up with water. There weren't any clear answers. They had to trust that the impossible was going to be made possible. That's all they had. Faith was the only guarantee they had, and faith was the only move they had to play. That's the only thing you can do. You're going to have to trust. But it doesn't make sense. Trust. You're going to have to trust. Jehoshaphat's the only one with the faith, and he knew how faith worked. He understood what faith was all about. He understood what faith was, and he understood how faith works. Look at Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 1. It says, "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." Which by definition is what? Well, read it one more time. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. Evidence is something that you can normally see. But faith is the evidence of things not seen. It's the substance of things hoped for. Faith is trusting that God is going to remain true even when everything else seems to be going the other direction. No, I have evidence. God is going to do the impossible. God is going to be faithful. Even though you don't see how it's going to work out, yes, that's the evidence I have, is my faith in God, that He's going to remain true. And that is the evidence that I need. It's the evidence of things hoped for. It's the substance of things hoped for, and the evidence of things not seen. But boy, when you have faith, it's like you can see it even though it's not there. I completely trust Him that He's going to fix this. He's not going to leave me. He's not going to forsake me. I trust Him, and that is evidence. When Elisha asked Jehoram why he wasn't just going back to one of the prophets that his mom and dad used to go to, the answer was more than obvious. It's because they never worked. It never worked. The false prophets of Baal never could deliver. Baal, the false god, never could deliver. Their gods never came through. Why don't you just go back to them? Because it doesn't work. It doesn't work. You see, it's not about the level of faith that you have, but who you're putting that faith in. Strong faith in a false god is still absolutely worthless. Put all the faith you want into something that is not true, and it will, man, I really, really believe, though, it should have worked out. It won't work out, because it's not the strength of your faith, it's the strength of the one you put your faith in. A lot of faith in a false god is completely pointless, but a little faith in an incredibly big God can move mountains. It's not the size of the faith, it's the size of the one that you put your faith in. Jehoshaphat knew that faith is what was needed, but he also knew the difference between true faith and dead faith. True faith requires action, and it will always require action. James gives us a beautiful illustration to help us understand what faith is supposed to look like. And it is very clear. He lets us know. He uses this illustration. So we're going to connect the illustration to faith here. Look at James chapter 2 and verse 14. It says, "What does it profit, my brethren, if someone says he has faith but does not have works?" There's no actions. "Can faith save him? If a brother or sister is naked and destitute of daily food, and one of you says to them, 'Depart in peace, be warmed and filled,' but you do not give them the things which are needed for the body, what does it profit? Thus also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead." That's a clear illustration there. Charity, which lies in word but not in action, is just as profitable as faith professed but never shown. Somebody comes up to you and say, "I'm cold and I'm hungry." Well, go be warmed and filled. Can you give me something? No, just be warmed and filled. Does it help them at all? No, thanks, I'm much warmer. And yeah, I'm not hungry at all. Thanks for saying that. It doesn't help. It really doesn't help at all. And James says, use this illustration to see what faith is supposed to look like. You say you got all this faith here, but it's just as good as if you did some act of charity without producing anything to help. The works are supposed to be the evidence of the faith. One without the other, that's the profit right there. Hey, be warm. I can't. I'm cold. I don't have anything to warm me. Well, be warm. That doesn't help. Do you believe in God? Yes. Why are you so nervous, and why are you trying to fix all this stuff? I have to. Will God take care of you? Yes, He will. Why are you panicking? Why are you so worried that He's not going to do it? I just don't know. What good's the faith? All the faith that you said you had, but there's no action behind that faith? What good is that? It's not profiting you anything. To profess that you're saved without ever humbling yourself and repenting of your sins is an empty faith. I've had a lot of people come up to me and tell me that they were saved. Yes, I'm saved. How did you get saved? Oh, I'm a good person. I believe God will send me to heaven. Okay, professing that you're saved isn't enough. The act of humility and repentance, you need that. You need that. The works need to follow the faith. They need to go together. Otherwise, one is dead without the other one. Faith is an amazing thing, but without works, it's dead being alone. Your works are the evidence that your faith is the real thing. God's completely capable of taking care of the things that you are not capable of doing, but sometimes He tells us to dig the ditches. I want you to dig. I don't want to dig. I want you to fix it. And I want you to dig. Dig the ditches. He tells us to live out that faith that we profess to have in Him. Do you believe me? Yes. Dig ditches. How's that going to... Asking questions really doesn't show the submission, does it? I tell my kids all the time, if I tell you to do something and you want to know why, let me tell you the best time to ask why. After you start obeying. Don't just come up to me and say, if I tell you to go do something, hey, go clean your room. Why? See, that's bad timing. That's bad timing. Yeah, you can still know why, I don't mind. But let's go ahead and obey. The act of obedience comes before the answers. And if I was in the wrong, I'll know real quick. Hey, go clean that mess up. I didn't do it, not bad timing. Let's walk over, show me a submission, and then talk to me while you're obeying. I want to see the act of obedience. Is it really obedience or really submission if I tell my kids to do something and they do it with a bad attitude and they're mad at me the whole time? It's obedience, but it's not submission. It's not submission. Faith, if you truly have faith, then your actions should support that faith. The way you live out your faith should be evidence. God already had the water supply ready to break loose. The water supply was there the whole time. But they had to dig the ditches. Somebody had to obey the command. Obey. I don't know how it's going to work. Obey. It doesn't make sense if I do this that you're going to supply in another way. That's all right. You don't have to know how. You don't have to know why. I just want you to obey. Obey. Start digging the ditches. The miracle's already ready to happen. It's already there. It's waiting to happen. How do I get to it? Obedience. Obey. The miracle's ready to happen, but somebody needs to obey. If they wouldn't have followed the command, then they would have missed out on the blessing altogether. Can you imagine that story, how anticlimactic that would have been? And Elisha says, go dig ditches, and they said no, and they died in the wilderness. And that's a fascinating story, isn't it? But that's how it would have happened. The act of obedience had to be there. We have to obey. And then God brings the miracle, which He had ready to lay out the whole time. I've got it ready. Go dig the ditches and I'll bring it right out to you. But you're going to have to obey. I need you to dig. I need you to obey, and then it will flow through. God wasn't asking these kings to dig ditches based on anything they had ever seen before. This doesn't make any sense. I'm asking you to dig it even though you don't understand. Just go dig. The command was to obey before any results or even logic was revealed. It doesn't make sense. Well, you can sit there and talk about that all day, or you can dig ditches. God often asks us to do the same thing. Look at 2 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 7. Short verse. For we walk by faith, not by sight. Does it always make sense? Does that ever make sense? Put your money in the offering plate. I really need this, God. I want you to give. Yeah, but how am I supposed to take care of what I need to do if I give it to you? Dig ditches. Okay? Go talk to that person. I don't know what to say, God. I have no idea. Go tell them about me. I'm not a public speaker, God. I can't do that. How is that going to work out? Me and my abilities. How's that supposed to happen? Just go dig. I'll take care of the rest. I'll give you the words to say when you get there. I want you to dig, even when it doesn't make sense. Our obedience to God is not supposed to be determined by how desperate we are, and it's not supposed to be determined by how much He has already revealed to us of how it's all going to work out. Faith doesn't come with the answers. If faith came with all the answers, would it be faith? Absolutely not. We're to remain faithful and obedient simply because we trust Him to always be faithful. I will be faithful. Why? Because I know you will always be faithful. You're always going to be true to your promises. Yeah, but God, it's like a risk. If I move forward in this area, it's a real risk and I don't want to do it. That's what faith is like. That's faith. I don't see where I'm going to land if I jump. Just jump. Do you trust that I'm going to do what I said I'm going to do? I believe it. Do you trust it? I believe it. If you believe it, if that's your faith, then may your actions match your faith. Why aren't you jumping if you truly believe it? Because as much as I believe it, I can't believe it. I can't see how it's going to work. That's not what faith is. Faith is going even when you don't see how it's going to work because you trust the one that says it's going to work. Obey. Just obey. Dig the ditches. But how's it going to get filled? That's not your problem. Your problem is whether you are or are not going to obey. That's your call. The rest God's going to take care of. We're to remain faithful and obedient simply because we trust Him to always be faithful. Look at Galatians 5:25. It says, if we live in the Spirit, let us also walk in the Spirit. Now, if you're saved, then you live in the Spirit and His Spirit lives in you. Just to cover that right there. His Spirit lives in you and you're in Him. We're in Him and He's in us. We've talked about that in the past too. You're in the Spirit. Well, if you're in the Spirit, then walk in the Spirit. If you live in the Spirit, then your walk should be matching. Your faith must be put into action. Do you trust Him? Absolutely. Then why aren't you obeying what He said to do? Because I need to make sure it's going to work out. That's not faith. That's a dead faith. Faith without works is dead being alone. It's a dead faith. You should never have to wait to obey God until you're comfortable with the idea. You shouldn't have to wait that long. You should be able to obey God just because you trust in God. Remember, it's not how big your faith is, it's how big your God is. And if you believe He's a little God and He's not really going to be able to take care of the problem, then guess what? Your actions are going to mimic that. You're not going to move forward like you're supposed to move because for some reason you see the size of your God is way too small. But God's big. And He says, I want you to obey. The only reason you're not obeying is not because God's not big enough to do what He said He was going to do, but it's because you're putting your faith into something else. Maybe it's in your own power to control the situation. I don't know what it would be, but why don't we move forward and why don't we obey? We need to always be digging ditches, knowing that our obedience is going to tap into a miracle that God already has laying there beneath the surface. I just want your obedience. I'll bring the rest out. Just obey. Dig the ditches. God tells us to give financially to the ministry. He tells us not to forsake the assembling of ourselves together. He tells us to love others as ourselves. And He tells us to worry about nothing but to trust in Him. Those are all ditches. Dig those ditches. And we should be digging them all the time, trusting that the blessings will follow. God's going to bless my faithfulness. I may not have what I think I need to obey right now, but I need to obey right now because I need to have what He has behind that ditch. And I don't know how He's going to fill that ditch, but I know I'm going to obey because I have a problem that I'm not capable of solving on my own, but I've got a God that's more than capable to solve my problem. So my only move is to obey. And I will obey even when it doesn't make sense. My actions are going to follow my faith. And I'm going to dig even when it doesn't make sense to dig. Faith is not only called into action when times get tough. Your faith is supposed to be evident through your actions all the time. You're supposed to remain faithful not only when it's panic time, but all the time. All the time. When the king of Israel was looking for options, King Jehoshaphat was not looking for options. He was going straight to the answer. While you're trying to figure out what we're going to do, I'm going to go straight to the answer. When Elijah spoke to King Jehoram, he made it very clear that God was not one of his options in this situation. He is your only hope. He is not an option. He's all you've got. So start digging ditches. Doesn't make sense? Then don't dig ditches. It's your call. Remember, if it wasn't for Jehoshaphat being here, I wouldn't be talking to you at all anyway. So just obey or not obey. That's your call. But all three kings go out there and they obey. And they dig those ditches. Elisha made it very clear that the false gods that his family had, that they put security in, were never going to bring the answer. Don't try to find security in anything outside of God. You want to know the one who can bring the water? It's Him. If you go any other way, try to control it yourself. What are you going to get? Nothing. Trust the one who's able to do the impossible. Trust the one who's able to bring the water even without the rain. He's not one of your options. He's your only hope. So put your faith in Him. The obvious question that Elisha was asking is, why did it take you so long to seek the one true God? Why don't you go back and call on the other gods? They don't work. What took you so long? Why are you here now? Now you're ready to listen to God because it's panic time. Now you're ready to listen to God because now things are getting tight. Where were you the rest of the time? Serving other gods, trying to solve your own problems, trying to do this or that, the other thing. Now you're interested in God because times are tough. But because of this other king's faith, because Jehoshaphat's here, yeah, God's going to go ahead and show you a display that you've never seen before. Start digging ditches. Doesn't have to make sense, just dig ditches. Some people turn to God when they see the light, and other people don't turn to God till they feel the heat. You've heard that before. Yeah, I see the light. Why don't you go? Not uncomfortable enough yet. Not enough heat yet. I'll run to Him when it starts getting uncomfortable. Be there all the time. Be faithful digging ditches all the time. Because right under the surface of all those ditches are a miracle ready to happen for you. There are blessings because God will always bless your faithfulness. He will always bless it. Do we wait until we're comfortable, or do we start digging, trusting that God's going to keep His word all the time? Look at Proverbs 28:20. A faithful man will abound with blessings. Do you believe it? Then be the faithful one. Dig all the time, knowing that God's got something ready for you. The blessings are already there. The miracles have already been set up. So let's start digging ditches. Yeah, but I don't need Him at the moment. You need Him every moment. You need Him every single moment of every single day. So obedience needs to happen every single moment of every single day. Don't wait till it's panic time. Dig, be obedient now, knowing that God will bless you because it says a faithful man will abound with blessings. Don't put your faith in anything other than God. Remember, it's not the size of your faith, it's the size of your God. And let's start digging ditches. Stand with me this morning.